Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.
All right. Hello, Get Better Faster Nation. I am Dr. Jason Bradley, and along with my co-host, the one, the only James Chester, and our incredible executive producer, Rachel Bradley, we want to welcome you to another exciting episode of the Get Better Faster podcast. Today, we're joined by Daniel Tardy, friend of mine, detox and transformational coach, TEDx speaker, and founder of getLIGHT, a global detoxification movement that's helping people around the world reclaim clarity in their mind, body, and spirit. Daniel's journey is absolutely fascinating, from his background in engineering and entrepreneurship to his transformative experience with chronic toxicity that led him to discover the healing rhythms of jungle living in Costa Rica. His personal breakthrough from toxicity to vibrant health has become the foundation for helping countless others achieve the same transformation. Through his work with plant medicine, sound alchemy, and indigenous wisdom, Daniel has uncovered what he calls timeless truths about human transformation that have been forgotten by our modern world. Without further ado, Daniel, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. So grateful to be here.
Yeah, we had such a great backstage conversation. I didn't want to let too much fall on the cutting room floor. So I'm like, hey, we better get this episode going because there's so much great content we're going to share today.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you dealt with your own situation, Daniel. Like you're dealing with your own chronic toxicity. And that was like the benchmark for you to start saying, hey, I figured out how to like help myself. Maybe I can open the door for other people and get them some help too. When was that moment that you realized that you could help people and get them better faster?
You know, it was coming into Costa Rica. I felt like I was probably one of the healthiest people on the planet, honestly. I mean, by that time I was, I had transitioned to veganism, which I wouldn't call myself that anymore. I tend not to go with the labels, but, I was plant-based. I knew what many supplements were. I was tracking the body, in a way, and then also reducing the amount of things that could increase inflammation or toxicity in the body. And yet when we live in the West, what's toxic sometimes is invisible to us. And it's not until you come to a place like Costa Rica that you actually can feel and realize, whoa, like maybe my body is a bit out of balance, So it was within the first couple years. I'd done a couple cleanses, and one of the cleanses really just rocked my world. And we can get into it, but it was really my introduction to plant medicine that led me to even doing that cleanse. And when I developed that cleanse and did it myself, it was absolutely transformative. And at that point, I was giving it away. I was like, as many people that have access to this process, they deserve it. It changed my life, and I knew it would, change other people's lives. And ultimately, what I realized is that people don't invest time into what they don't invest in ultimately. So me giving it away really didn't equate to very much, but it did show me what I could do next as far as making this a prepackaged, process that people could purchase, and I was doing this in the middle of the jungle technically, and so a lot of what I've done has been inspired from living very autonomously off grid, and living in a community here in Costa Rica. And then that's expanded into what it is today. So it's pretty profound. Yeah.
Well, me coming from the marketing background, I always tell people to give away their best stuff.
Yeah.
And that creates that bond with people. And if it's good at free, then it's even better when you can like figure out how to move the money line. And it sounds like you developed some strategies in order to do that.
Yeah.
It's just really cool to hear your story, because there's things that come into people's lives that they don't know how to really control. And most of them are thoughts, traumas, and toxins. They just don't realize how that they can help themselves cleanse of those things, or who their guides are to get them out of that mess that they're in. And I think as we talk today, we're going to ask you a lot of questions about how to get people out of those three topics, thoughts, traumas, and toxins.
Yeah.
And
I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah. No, man, me too. I know we just got started, but there's already so much to unpack. I've already been keeping notes. So, I just want to say this. It's interesting because I think that, again, I was just getting interviewed on the Bold Conversations podcast earlier this year. And I just saw a clip of myself. And I think the question was, why are people struggling this day? And my answer was just one thing after another, after another, after another, which was basically like, in this modern world, what aren't people struggling with anymore? And I want to tie this back into what you said, which I think is really interesting. You said when we live in the West, a lot of the toxicities are invisible, and before we even jump in deeply into the overt, observable toxins, I mean, traumas come to mind, physical traumas anyway, certainly different diseases that we can name and all this kind of stuff. I want to really dive in a little bit into what the heck did you mean? I don't want to make any assumptions. Tell us about invisible toxins in the West.
Yeah, I mean, life in the West already is somewhat removed from, let's say, nature in the way that nature organizes reality, you can say. And so it's somewhat artificial. And I lived in that reality. I was electrical engineer, graduated from one of the best engineering schools in the country, moved to Iowa in 2007 to start my career. And pretty much right away, I was kind of feeling the pressure that society had already placed on my unconscious. I noticed that I was taking actions and I was in situations and at my job, and I've got a career now, and I'm joining work parties and people that are retiring after 40 years of work, and I was like, whoa, like 40 years this person's been here doing this. And so these were some of my initial wake up calls, like, no, I can't. I don't think I could, spend 40 years here. There must be, some other things. And so some of it has to do with our way of thinking, our way of patterning ourselves inside of society that takes us further and further away from maybe things that we don't even know are there, and some people don't realize that nature is there as an ally for us. And, so if we are not realizing that, then all of the other things in society that are potentially there to, I don't want to necessarily say harm us, as if, someone's intentionally just like, messing with humanity in that way. Yet for sure, the food is being manipulated. The water's not well taken care of. The environment, when it comes to pollution, when it comes to, population and, just how life is constructed, it's not as natural as it could be. And that sense lives in people that are living in that environment. They're realizing that, even if it's at the level of the nervous system and the unconscious. And some people are rising up or waking up to this and coming to, folks like you guys and folks like me, like, yo, something's not quite correct in my world, in my mind, in my, reality.
I think it's interesting too. I don't know if you said this word, but just when you start, doing that list, so to speak, of food, water, environment, pollution, population. I mean, not to mention, what I always like to throw in, which to me is like stress, and we can define stress in a lot of different ways. But I'm going to pull to you that it seems, and I know you have a background in engineering. I know you said, I don't know if it's purposeful or not, or, you didn't quite say like there's a cabal that's out there, trying to like, make us all sick and whatnot. But when I hear that and I put it all together, and it's kind of what I was saying on the Bold Conversation podcast, it seems engineered. It seems to all fit together much too nicely. And I'm curious about, from an engineering perspective, and I don't even know where I'm going with this question, but does this stuff happen like randomly? It seems like the puzzle pieces all fit together. I'm not asking you to say that, yes, there's a call. From an engineering point of view, does it seem purposeful, coming back to the word that you used?
Well, I can put it like this. As a society, we're definitely organizing ourselves to a beat of the drum that maybe we're not hearing, maybe we're not realizing is there. And when I think of it from the engineering perspective, there were technologies when I was, doing the work that I was doing, there were technologies that existed before they even had the material to manifest the function of the technology, right? So some of what we're kind of living into things that have been around, and maybe this is not even the first time that they've been around in this way. maybe society now has deduced itself down in a way to, being a bit more mechanistic in its approach to life. And when you look at nature, nature tends to organize itself not in the same ways, not in the same patterns. So I think it's a function of humanity, masculine, feminine, male, female, functioning outside of their original nature, their original context without knowing what that actually is, right? And so it'd be like if you put an engineer on his first day in a meeting room and we've got slides on the wall. Now we've got program discussions and we've got designs that we're speaking. He's like, there's going to be a part of him that because of his training, because of his background, because of his schooling, he's going to click into that gear and not really question very much. And plus he's being paid to be in that position. So that's us. We got trained from when we were however old through a certain way of thinking, a certain school system, which, programs us to think in a certain way. And by the time we become adults, we've mechanized most of our ability to process reality. So much so that by that time, it's transactionary. Is that a word? It's based in transaction. So it's like, I give my time, I receive this. I give of my skill, I receive this. I give of my love, I receive this, right? There's a lot of conditioning, living from conditioning that's happening. And the stress that we're talking about is ultimately the stress that we're experiencing from that conditioned way of living. It's us silently breaking or attempting to break free from those conditions and from those pressures, from that stress-based system that we may not even realize that we're living in.
I know James has something to say here, but I don't know where I picked up this word. James probably knows, but I call that stinking thinking because we're so it's so subconscious and we don't even realize the way we're thinking. It's just like you said, it's automated and our society just layers on more and more and more that everybody thinks that way and everybody does it this way. So it must be the way that things are. And then all of a sudden we have people like you and me and James and our listeners that are like, wait a minute, like you said, 40 years of this. I can't do this. Like, this is not my passion. This is not my spirit. This is not my soul. This is not my heart. I cannot do it. And so what we do is we step outside off the conveyor belt. What is it? Birth, school, work, death, right? I mean, that's what we all do: birth, school, work, death. And that's all we do. And it's that stinking thinking. But when we step off of that treadmill, it can be a lonely world because there's not a clear direction to go at that point. And it can become overwhelming and confusing. So when you stepped off that conveyor belt, which you did, which I'm so happy. And I think I met you around that transition, actually. When you stepped off that conveyor belt, what was your next step? Like, tell me about that. Tell me about that part of the transformation.
Yeah, for me, there was a process in stepping off the conveyor belt because I think I stepped off the conveyor belt onto larger conveyor belts. Like, it was like escalators at that point. And because I went from my world of engineering, as an employee, and at this point I had been reading books and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it's like, okay, maybe I need to become an investor because like this employee and this quadrant thing is pointing that an employee is really a slave and like maybe I should really invest, right? So I started to get into real estate investing and redesigning homes. And so essentially that also then plunged me further into that system because now I'm in debt, utilizing that system in order to get ahead, which I'm not really saying is right or wrong. If it serves people and what their soul is here to essentially accomplish, then great. But I realized after doing that for about 5 years that it was like going the opposite way. It's like, whoa, okay, now I need to actually break free from this thing. And that happened almost in a way where like I feel like my higher self was giving me situations where it forced my hand to kind of give up that reality because I just started to not be as successful or affluent, and the bills were piling up and the houses were, not getting done quick enough and the banks are knocking on the door. And so at this point, I really, forced myself to start selling everything off. And it was at that point that I felt more free than I ever had. And I think I actually had at that point more money than I had while I was doing more time and more energy and more money than I had than when I was, deep into building that out. And so that's when I started to travel. I went to, Central America. I came to Costa Rica. I went to Bali, at one point, went to Europe. And that's when I started to really expand and see the world in a totally different way. And I'd go to cities in Europe and different places like, why aren't people at work? Like people are just out and moving around and drinking wine and just living life. And it was what I was doing as well, but I had done certain things in order to arrive at that point. And I knew that if I position myself correctly, I can actually do this right from the level of the soul without having to give myself over to a corporation or to a bank. I can do this in a natural way. I just didn't know what that was, but I think my higher self was guiding me to that. And that ultimately led me to moving to Costa Rica, which was in 2020. Actually came here in February of 2020.
Oh, wow. Timing.
Yeah, right before COVID. But there was a whole lead up to even what led me here right before all that happened, because I was having dreams of planes not taking off, and I was having dreams of houses catching on fire. And from speaking about the engineering background, that was a time where they were really talking about the smart meters, and they were deploying all these smart meters. And I wasn't really into like the conspiracy aspect. And there were people that were, let me hang this note on the door so I can resist this thing being on my house. But I was like, something's weird with this, like I can't really figure it out, but like people are picking up on something, right? Mm-hmm. There's something in the field that maybe I should also be paying attention to. And so there were times where I would have complete realizations of these smart meters being the potential cause of certain things that were maybe going to happen in the future. And I didn't know why I was having those ideas, those thoughts, but they were just coming to me. And I don't know why I was having the dreams of like planes not taking off and things like that. But, essentially this is what was happening in my own consciousness, and I think that also speaks to when we're being guided and when we're really listening, there is always something that is beyond us, that is putting us in certain positions so we can serve how we're supposed to. And that was what my guidance was, essentially guiding me towards, was to be in nature, to come to Costa Rica and to explore who I am in this environment. Mm-hmm. And of course my life is completely different than it was then.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Couple clarity questions for you, Daniel. What type of engineer were you, did you go to school for, and what were you doing?
Yeah, I was an electrical engineer, and I was working on military radios. So working in the realm of testing and designing, high frequency devices.
And then I think that's a good stance, because we got right up in here and we just start talking about like moving the world around for you and how you start transforming your life to help more people. But baseline questions, I think, are really the discovery point for me. I like this early on in the conversation with you. And then what was the toxicity load that you were dealing with and that you started triggering you off that like, damn, I got to do something?
Yeah, it was, I think it was from me having come to Costa Rica. And of course, in Costa Rica, we have access to, fruits that are falling off the tree. I mean, you can eat pretty healthy here without trying very hard because of how things grow. And it was me consuming what I felt were like some of the best foods. And over time, especially after being here for a couple of years, I started to feel my energy actually declining. It was like I was like slowing down, and my thought processes weren't as sharp. And of course I was in a new environment, but I felt like I should have been more vital. Like I felt like my life force and my creative fire, my energy should have been higher than what it was. And it was really that was showing me that something was off in my system. And there was no real way for me to draw the context of what that could have been. I at that point, I didn't know anything about detoxification. I knew about being plant-based and eating healthy, but I didn't know that toxins were really a thing, that even toxins that I had 7 years before could still be living in my liver because my liver is congested or just based on it being the hardest working organ in my body, that maybe it wasn't quite able to keep up with, the type of air quality that I had been living in for years, or the food I had been consuming, or me redesigning houses and being around mold and asbestos and things like this. I didn't know that, these things would essentially catch up to me, or even like alcohol that I maybe drank in, long ago. At that point, I wasn't really drinking, but it was a podcast that I had actually been listening to, and a mentor of mine mentioned that on this podcast, that if your finances are a little shaky, if your digestive fire is low, if your creativity is not what it's supposed to be, you might want to check your gut. And so as I listened to those words come across, I knew immediately that something was happening inside of me, and it probably had to do with my gut. So, with my engineering background, I just like dove, headfirst into researching as much as I could about the gut. And essentially that led me to designing a cleanse for myself, which just so happened to be a parasite cleanse. These were some of the things that I was realizing that maybe could have either been afflicted with or encountered throughout my life, that now I actually had the possibility of taking ownership of, taking accountability of, and ridding myself of it if it actually was there. So it really started out as an experiment.
Well, there's so much that you shared so far, and there's a lot of things that have come up to me just as an intuitive and a curious person, and somebody that loves to take a bit of a deeper dive on some of the points you make. And the first thing is you went to college, you got yourself a massive degree, and you got yourself that good job.
Yeah.
The job of our dreams. I had one of those too at one point. Backgrounds in journalism, actually. So I was working for a newspaper, and I got that job. I got the job I wanted, and it was really powerful because I had actually done the thing. And then I got there, and I felt a lot like you. I'm like, there's a lot of people here that aren't like living in their soul genius. They're not like living real life. They're living in this trap, and they're not really experiencing life. They're just a highly educated individual that are doing things that aren't really serving them. And one of my mentors will always tell me, you're only alive a little time and you're dead a long time. You got to do things that serve you in that little bit of time. So
Wow.
it sounds like to me that you realized that you didn't want the slow death of building houses and fixing up houses, and you realized that that was what we know today is called epigenetics. You're a product of your environment, you know? So you being the educated man going to Iowa, you're a part of that epigenetic environment, which dictated your future. And then you said, no, cancel, delete. I'm going to go out there and see the world a little bit. But by the way, in order for me to experience life at my optimum potential, I have to really like investigate what's going on with my energy. The part that really fascinates me, because I've been to Costa Rica before, and I think you had to adapt to 6 p.m. dark times, and how the sun keeps you on the rhythm of life down there. And
Yeah.
I think that the circadian rhythm in you which changes your energy, and you have different up times, you have different sleep times, and it goes completely dark. Isn't it like 6:30? It's completely
Yeah.
dark down there every day.
Yeah.
Like there's no daylight savings time. There's no change in when the sun comes up, when the sun goes down. You guys are on like the continuum of the sun comes up now, the sun goes down now, and now that's your new zone of existence. So I think that had a lot to do with your adaptability, and then your body's adapting to that new environment. So I could see how some of these things we consider that are going to make us better and healthier because we're eating like the local flavor. But I do see also that we have to adapt big time. I'm on airplanes all the time. I'm in different time zones. The sun's coming up different place and it's going down a different place. And if you've said this is going to be home, that's a major part of everybody that goes to Costa Rica and adapts to. So I think that that's a big part of the conversation too, is your environment is who you become.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I don't want to gush too much here, but one of my good friends said that, you're literally basically said, even the beauty of your environment can dictate your health, not just the sun, patterning, and I've noticed that, like I said, we're visiting our younger daughter out here in Moab. I've never been here before. It's flipping beautiful around here. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's the way the sun moves, the way the clouds move. I mean, it's a different canvas. Every time I look out the window or go on a different hike, I could do the same hike 3 times in the same day, and it's a different canvas that I'm looking at. In Iowa, I'm not trying to diss Iowa. I know that we have two ex-Iowans on the call and a third one about to be. But when I came out here, I started thinking about going home, and I started getting really, sad about it. Not just because I have to leave my daughter out here, but I think the Midwest has some beauty there. But I mean, it's also, we took our dogs out for a walk the other day, and on a regular, trail, like a hunting grounds type of trail so they can run around. And all of a sudden, Rachel said, "What's that farmer doing off in the distance?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then she's like, "Oh crap, I think he's spraying." And it was not too far away from us. And then he started driving that, I don't know what they're called. I'm just going to call it a sprayer. He started driving this thing kind of in our direction, and he turned off the spray, but it turned out the trail that we were walking on was kind of between his fields trail as well. So he was driving this thing right towards us and the dogs. And by that point, I could smell the glyphosate or whatever it is they were spraying. I mean, whatever it was, the cancer causing, crap chemicals. And we started jogging as fast as we could to not have this thing pass us or get near us with these chemicals all around. And that's when I really made the commitment that we need to move. That was a little earlier this year. And then now being out here in the West, at last here in Utah and we're looking at the Boise area and some other areas. I think it's so important that the environment that we're in, yes, the rhythms, but also the actual chemical environment, the beauty environment, the people environment. It's just very interesting. And then hearing James talk about adapting to Costa Rican, sun and whatnot, I think people adapt to the beauty in their environment. And I think they get complacent with that's just the way it is. And that's just the way that we live. And then, in the Midwest, it's, how much ranch and fried food can we eat? Ranch dressing and fried food can we eat? And it's just a different perspective. I'm just rambling at this point. I just want to join the conversation about environment. Really is what, sorry, James.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. I used to think of Iowa. Somebody even mentioned when you think about time and how time is really a spiral, right? It's not linear. Right, we're having a cyclical experience. Everything actually is happening in cycles, and you really notice that, especially in places like the Midwest, because you've got the 4 seasons. And so, what somebody said to me is that the way that time moves when you're living at the center, let's say, of the U.S., time really isn't changing very quickly, and it is more happening on these outer rings. Like if the center of this sort of circle or the spiral is in the Midwest or around the Midwest, and let's say at the rings are places like, New York and the East Coast and the West Coast, that the actual movement of those zones, the way that is spiraling dictates how life essentially is moving and how people are being moved by life. And in the Midwest, if we're looking at it as it's more of a steady state, then the patterning of life doesn't really change. And people may not even realize or notice that it's not changing, or they may not notice how quickly it actually is changing, because it's sort of happening outside of their context or outside of their ability to have concept of time in that way. That you can look at that as a small town where all of a sudden, Cedar Rapids is a great example. Cedar Rapids, boom, it took a whole flood to come through and almost wipe out Cedar Rapids for them to hyper develop that area. And so if you look at what was happening before flood, which is when I got to Cedar Rapids, and what happened after, it's 2 different versions of that city. And that happened because it almost wiped the slate clean of what people's expectations or what they had seen for so many years. It wiped the slate clean of that. And not to mention all of the, the actual buildings and things that were damaged, which required many people to sort of reinvest and shift in different ways. So
that's interesting. Sorry, James, go ahead.
No, I'm just really curious about the GetLIGHT method. You
Mm,
know, I think that we're talking a lot about like your personal life and, the American dream, if that's really true or not. And
Yeah.
now it sounds like the Costa Rica dream.
Yeah.
And then Jason's struggling with like brand identity of location. And I think that there are some things that what happened to us is when we are dissatisfied with who we are or where we live or the job that we picked, we choose different.
Yeah.
And that's free will. When I was back in college and I had to take the 101 philosophy class, I learned about this thing called free will. And it sounds like we're all exercising a bit of free will to be free thinkers, and to find out what our own dream is.
Yeah.
And, there's an old saying, I'm really good at these one line things, but they say the man that has his health has a million dreams, the man that doesn't has one.
Mm,
And you could say woman also. You could say dog. The dog that has its health has a million dreams. The dog that doesn't has one. And I think that when you think about the convexity of that statement, when we don't find healthy environment, when we don't find healthy recreation, when we don't find healthy plan in our occupation, we want something new. And that's the beautiful thing about us is we have the ability to be transient and go someplace that serves us better. As you went through that approach, um, how does your detox methodology differ from like typical juice cleanses or
mhm.
supplement protocols that people might be familiar with? Like, what is the Get Light method, and how? I mean, because people are like, oh, cleanse, liver cleanse, or I need to like do like I don't know. You were talking about gut. I need to cleanse my gut.
Yeah.
How does your cleanse differ from juice cleanses or maybe some supplement cleanses?
Yeah. That's a great question. The first thing I want to say, and it actually fits into a tagline that we have, which is detox your life.
mm,
And ultimately, that's what we're speaking about. When we talk about changing locations, when we talk about changing environments, maybe looking at ourselves in the mirror to see, are we in the healthiest state or are we not? That ultimately is inviting us at the door. And we can knock on that door, and that door on it says, ultimately, do you want to detox your life? And we led with, is life even toxic? Like, are people even recognizing that that's happening? Are people realizing the chemicals that are in the water could be affecting their health or their hormone health? Or are people realizing that the chemicals that are being sprayed on the food or in the fields are shedding off into the water, and then that's affecting their what the quality of the water that they're drinking? Are people recognizing that the inflammation that is potentially happening in the body is not just because they're allergic to a specific type of food, or just because they ate that thing that they weren't supposed to eat? Are people realizing that the fact that life in and of itself could be toxic, whether you're in a location or not, and that you can actually do something about that? And you really don't have to make a huge shift. You don't have to move to Utah, or you don't have to move to Costa Rica in order to detox your life, but it does require us to recognize that something may be a little off, and just remaining a bit curious of what that can be, not to tabulate or not to create a list of all the things that are wrong, or here's why my life is this way, but ultimately to give us autonomy, give us the ability to respond, or what they call response ability. That's really what we want. And when I think about cleanses and detoxification, it's one of the primary ways that a person in their own time, in their own ways, can become free. They can have these realizations of health. They can have those realizations and increase that longevity of the dreams that they have by simply taking, and what I like to call it is structured action. Because I was one of those people that, again, I was at this point, I was vegan. So I had graduated from the meat eating childhood that I had been in, where, my family was, cooking meat on the grill. And, we had, literally restaurants where we were serving food that potentially wasn't that great for people's bodies. So I graduated from that, cutting out meat, then going into veganism, and then figuring out that it wasn't necessarily about what I was putting in my body. It was my ability to remove or reduce or to eliminate what I had accumulated over the years. So That is the approach that I have. It's not about how healthy you are. It's not about what you eat and what you don't eat. It's about, do you have a structured process that actually allows you to tend to your body in an intentional way? This is what getLIGHT does. So what I noticed is that if people were like me, they already thought that they were healthy. They really didn't have a context or anything to compare their health to, except, well, that guy is, or that woman is over there, like, they're pretty sick. I'm not that, so I must be healthy. But our health is based in the things that we can't see. Of course, it's based in our vitality, but cancer is even an invisible thing until somebody's telling you if you're not feeling good, and then somebody's doing a scan on you and they're, or taking your blood, and they're like, hey, there's something off. All that was happening internal. So there needs to be a different type of listening that happens within the body in order for us to know what's happening. And for me, when we're eliminating the excess, when we're eliminating the toxicity in a structured way, then the ability to listen and to hear what the body is communicating to us increases, right? That voice that's always been there, that's always guiding us, it's always telling us, hey, you might want to pay attention to me. Like, I keep showing you through these symptoms that something's not quite right. And what can people actually do if those symptoms are coming up? And so that's where detoxification comes in, or where getLIGHT comes in, where we bring a structured approach to how to look at the body. We introduce what I would consider plant medicines, essentially, but not in the traditional sense where you have to go to the jungle to have plant medicine, but the stuff that's growing in people's backyards as weeds usually are the exact things that they may want to be taking. They even say the things that are growing in your environment, that are growing in your backyard, because we live in a symbiotic, reality. That means that you are connected to everything. And so what's growing in your backyard potentially could be growing specifically for you. Now, whether a person believes that or not, maybe go take your app, your ChatGPT, and take a picture of some of the things that are growing wild and crazy and see what they are, and then see what the properties of those things are. And it'll tell you. We have the technology where we can actually not only be curious, but we can jump in and take that power to make different choices.
I think that's exactly. I'm working on a book right now, which is actually started out as an anti-veganism book. I'm just teasing. I'm totally teasing about that. It's called Carnivore Consciousness, but I'm always exploring different types of diets. And the reason it's not just carnivore diet is that as I was exploring the carnivore diet, I realized stripping away the diet to like its bare essentials taught me a lot about how much excess that I find in my own life in a lot of different areas, whether that be just material things that I own, or the way that I spend my time, or things I'm bombarded with. And it's interesting because it seems like what we're talking about, this natural order of things, that's kind of where I'm pulling this from, is that at least in the US, which I have the most experience with, it seems like we're living inverted to the natural order of things. And then we might not even be realizing it, because as we keep talking about environment, as you said, we're so inverted that we've forgotten, it's a different word. Let me say it differently. We've forgotten how to listen to our bodies. We've forgotten how to listen to our spirits. And I find that really curious, especially when we start looking at, again, the people around us. And we're over here, James is in Colorado and we're in Moab. And I look around and you know what? People are fit. I mean, they're out doing stuff. They're moving. And not everybody, right? Not everybody, but just collectively, there's a fitter look to people. People are eating differently. And then back again, picking on the Midwest again. So I have a love-hate relationship with the Midwest. When you start comparing yourself, if you are one of the people that's out and moving, you're like, well, I'm not that guy. I don't weigh 300 pounds, so I must be okay. And you go to your doctor and he weighs 300 pounds, and and they're taking 15 different pharmaceuticals, and that's what they're calling health. And it becomes this interesting internal comparison that we probably don't even realize subconsciously that we're doing. And kind of pulling this back again to living this inverted life away from the natural order of things. We talked about this in the green room before, but we always say that there is a universal intelligence that's everything. And then there's this innate intelligence, which is a fractal of that's within each of us. And then we have this educated intelligence, which is the filter that, our brains figure out. And when our brains get conditioned that the educated intelligence is smarter than the universal and innate intelligence, I think that's where we run into problems. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on board. and you're saying to people that you're a product of your environment again. And I think that that's like the course of the pattern here is when you start to listen to the whisper, you should pay attention to that. Otherwise, it'll become a scream. And, like Daniel was saying, there was things whispering to him about being in the house building and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There was things that he was paying attention to that were whispering to him about his education and the job he chose. And then he paid so much attention that eventually it started screaming at him. And then he said, well, what can I do to start reframing everything? And I don't feel so good when I chose this path. I quit grilling and chilling, and now I'm going and drinking cold pressed juice and eating vegetables. And I think that there's a big transition there too. He goes from, 0 to 60 as fast as he can, and in a life that, that was like bestowed upon him because of his familial roots. And then he decides to go do different. And all of a sudden he realizes that him doing different might not have served him the best either, but it was a different choice that he made because that was the product of the environment he was in now. And then we go back to this getLIGHT, which I love the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to anchor back to the topic of your zone of genius. And the getLIGHT, there's also a big word called subluxation within the chiropractic space that Jason and I are both a part of. If you guys don't know Dr. Jason Bradley, 25 years chiropractor.
Hold on. 25 years, 11 months, and 29 days.
Ooh,
26 few days.
Okay, so 26 years practitioner. And how long have you been doing functional medicine, Dr. Jason?
About 26 years, 25 years as well. Yeah.
So practicing functional medicine. And one of the things I picked up from you, Daniel, you're talking about backyard plants and how that might be a little bit too alternative for people and put people out of their comfort zone. But
I mean, people are still killing dandelions, right? Dandelions are one of the most powerful things. Like I literally, in most of my cleanses, I use either dandelion leaves or dandelion roots. So, I mean, we're unknowingly killing the primary medications that could bring balance to the body.
Yeah, we look at them as weeds. But back to this subluxation thing, and in chiropractic, we believe that people are made of fractals of light, and that if you have a misalignment in the spinal cord with the bone out of place, putting pressure on the nervous system, you have less light. And what I tell people all the time is that when somebody's body is in alignment, the reason they call it an organ system because everything's organized. And if things aren't organized, then they're out of alignment. So we have to find out how to bring those things within back to alignment. And sub, if you guys want to break down the word, means less, right? Like if you're like subground, you're underground. And then the word lux, which is the meaning of light. So subluxation, misalignment. So if you think about what you're doing, is you're getting light back into people and restoring them back to lightness rather than darkness. And you're allowing their body to come back on board with its own innate intelligence.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Like I tell people all the time, Daniel, if you cut your finger right now, you don't have to look at it and tell it to heal.
Yeah.
The innate intelligence within you won't allow yourself to die. It will heal it and scab and become a scar. And eventually you won't even be able to tell it anything ever happened. Like you don't have to say finger heal.
Yeah.
Like the body just naturally heals. So when you find out where that misalignment is in your light source and you start correcting it, the body has the adaptability back to our environments and where we choose our thoughts, traumas, and toxins, physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Now we are compounding this whole matter back into your zone of genius, which is, hey, try this and not that. And if you try it this way, and get light,
Yeah. Which obviously is maybe a double or triple entendre. For those that don't know, obviously plants grow because they're receiving light, and not every plant grows in the light, but most of them do. Most of them require some degree of light. Even, the house plants that are supposed to be, shade capable, they need a little bit of light, or certain aspects of nourishment, even if that's the moisture that's in the air. So for sure, the plants are receiving this illumination. And when I think about herbs largely are still in their original form. There are herbs that have been are descendants of things that have been, cut, treated, modified, and things like that. But there are also herbs that have been around for a really, really, really long time. And so they still have what we're calling that innate intelligence. And so essentially, when we're intentionally delivering certain herbs in a structured way into the body, we are receiving the innate intelligence of that plant. And usually the way that the way that plants work is not just like, okay, this is a plant and this is what it does and this is the name of it, but look at what color it is. Look at how it grows. Look at where it grows. Like, wow, that thing seems to be growing through the concrete, right? So think about that plant. If that plant is a spirit, which I trust that, that plant is sentient, it's alive, right? Meaning like, okay, if I don't water it, it dies. Or if I don't especially for those that are in the house, like if I domesticate them, I have to treat them as like living beings or else they'll essentially die. So what we're saying is that the way that certain plants grow, where they grow, whether it's a bark or root, these have to do with the way that we can receive. I can say it in a different way. How that plant grows often affects where it lands in our body, how it affects the body, right? So a root is going to usually work on the deeper parts of the body, especially like those lower three chakras. So Cascara sagrada, like licorice root, marshmallow root, those are all going to be digestive aids, right? Where you have herbs that are like gotu kola that kind of grow above ground and they almost like lift above the ground. Those are going to be nervine. So they're going to assist, or tulsi basil, the way that those grow are going to resemble to us, especially if we're looking at it in this way. They're going to affect those different parts of our body that are also aligned to that. And then you can take it a bit further and say, okay, as I'm preparing that herb, and let's say I'm making that tea, that came with Daniel's getLIGHT Detox kit. Wow, the water consistency seems to be a bit different. It almost has like a mucilage type of property to it. Well, so does your intestinal lining. So, wow, like you mean that if I drink this thing that's similar to the properties of my intestinal lining, then it could actually impact that? Yeah. So I look at herbs as being a mirror reflection that the Most High has given us in this realm that reflect to us, if we're in communication and communion with them in a good way, reflect to us our ability to arrive at that innate sentience internally. The body, of course, heals itself. And if for some reason the environments that we live in, if the of course, the toxicity levels, the rate of that potentially is moving a little bit faster than our body's ability to heal itself, especially in a stressful, type of life, then sometimes we need a little bit of assistance. And that's where your ability of intentionally setting the body on a path or setting the body straight now allows for things to start to self-organize or become organized in their own way, in their own time. But we can assist that, process.
I think that's amazing, for sure. And I like the getLIGHT because, again, using that idea of the subluxation or the state of being less than light, I love the idea that plants, they're absorbing light. They transform light into plant energy or plant medicine. And then we get to take those plants and eat those plants, whether it's as food or as herbs. And we get to put that light back literally into our bodies. It's part of what we're doing. Chlorophyll, plant blood, is really similar to human blood, in structure, chemical structure. And, plants literally they biotransform the UV light, the sunlight, into pure energy that our bodies say, that's what I need. So I love that getLIGHT. The plants are getting light, the people are getting light. And then also, just on a real practical level, I'm going to make an assumption. We haven't mentioned it at all on this call, but I'm going to make an assumption. I bet that when people are going through Daniel's getLIGHT method, right? I assume they're actually losing some weight a lot of times too, right? Because we carry a lot of that around. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but am I They're actually getting lighter.
That's a triple entendre.
That's a triple entendre.
That's
exactly.
a triple entendre, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. I mean, tell me about weight loss with this.
Yeah. So the body, right? If we trust the intelligence of the body, in most environments, the body can self-heal. So under the right circumstances, when you cut that, as long as you're not swimming in, mucky water, that wound is going to heal, right? So the body in the proper conditions does what it needs to do in order to arrive at, the highest form of stasis that it can reach in that particular environment. So ask that question again. So because I'm going to get there, but I wanted to.
I was working on that triple entendre, right? That people are doing the and actually getting lighter.
Exactly. So when we treat the body in that systematic way, the way that it's sort of piled on toxicities, and usually when there's higher toxicity, there's higher weight, because our liver wraps or stores toxic things in fat. So literally, if we take something that's toxic, even things like alcohol, if you drink enough alcohol, then all of a sudden that can turn into a fatty liver, which is your body's intelligence, your body's mechanism of protecting you from those toxins, and it stores it. So that's where a lot of people's weight gain come from, is from the protection that the body is creating. And we can some people even look at, like, there's certain therapists that'll say, people that carry a bit more weight or a bit more, bulk on their bodies, that's also emotional protection.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So what we do is we reverse that. So we say, okay, well, if the liver is, piling weight on because the body now doesn't have the mechanisms in order to actually purge out these toxins, then maybe we should focus on the liver. Okay, cool. But then if the body is then purging toxins, well, where do they leave the body? Well, they leave the body through, the pathways of detoxification. So your colon is primary to that. Your primary organ of detoxification is, of course, the liver, but the liver is instructing the kidneys on what to do and how to do it. And all those systems are then also informing where the toxins are best to leave the body. So if those systems are backlogged, then all of a sudden the skin, different rashes and things show up. So we have to look at the body as an intelligent system. And if there is this quote unquote backlog, then we can start to open up the pathways and intentionally bring approaches that allow us to slowly remove or to eliminate things through these pathways.
Yeah.
Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine."
Yeah.
And I think that is the fundamentals. And as I come to realize is that the body needs nothing extra in it, simply needs no interference. When we clear the interference up, the body self-regulates and self-heals. And that's what you're talking about. It's not just the weight of getting light from the toxins, but it's also the emotional weight. And you said a lot of times it's trapped in like the coils of the liver pathway, or it's trapped in the coils of the gallbladder pathway. You didn't say that, but I'm just going for the detoxifiers. Like these things are actually the detox pathways. And there's these detox pathways from the kidneys. So if those things, as heart plaque per se, start to get built up, you have a heart attack. People just aren't talking about liver attacks. Like we just don't know what to call it. So there's no really like phraseology around it. But that's what happens when people have a liver attack. They become toxic and they start putting on weight. So if you start cleaning up the bile pathways from the gallbladder to the kidney to the liver, now we don't have no more liver attacks. We have the body starts to like shed the weight and the emotional state starts to improve. And like you said, the outer epidermal layer starts to improve too. Because if one thing isn't detoxing the right way, it's going to show up symptoms in other parts on different parts of the organ system. And like I said, the reason that we reduce the subluxation and restore body back to balance, removing the interference, is because we restore light to people and we allow the body to go back to what in the medical world that I don't really live in, they call it homeostasis. So if we can bring people back to the balance of health and intelligent design, now there's no more liver attacks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I got to unpack some of this. I got 4 points. If I remember all,
Go, Jason, go.
Dude, it's going to be a miracle. I'm going to tell you right now, because I mean, And my ADHD is kicking in too. So I've like 28 thoughts right now. First of all, I wanted to say before both of you said what you said, I had written down this: life will find a way. The expression of the innate intelligence will always work to rebalance the system as long as we don't get in the way. And I think that's an interesting thing. The other thing I wanted to mention about liver is we have an epidemic in the United States that's called NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. What does that mean? It means that I have basically the liver of an alcoholic, and cirrhosis, like real bad, like going to die, but I'm not drinking, right? And it's because of this bioaccumulation of toxins. It's the foods we're eating, it's the stress that we're under, and et cetera. And it seems like, wow, well, that could take years to happen. And look at all these adults that have NAFLD, right? But guys, we're seeing it in children. We're seeing it in less than 10-year-olds. We're seeing 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds with NAFLD, with toxic liver. And clearly, hopefully, they're not drinking, shots of vodka every 5 hours or every 5 minutes. These kids are really sick. And I was thinking about how different the world is. I'm not going to take it back to environment, but how different the world is with, our great grandparents growing up. They had their own struggles for sure, but they did not have this toxicities that we're exposed to today. And we're seeing this rampant sickness. People are dying. Kids are dying of NAFLD and cardiovascular disease in their preteen years, and no one's talking about it.
Wow.
And I'm not even trying to get into like heart attacks due to the controversy around the vaccines. And so I'm talking about beyond that. We're seeing NAFLD in children, and children dying of liver disease, heart disease, all related to this liver toxicity, which finally brings me to my question to a certain extent. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I've noticed, coming back to the way the body works, right? We're storing, let's bring it back. Daniel mentioned that when we have this bioaccumulation, besides just storing up in the liver and congesting the liver, it starts to accumulate as body fat, extra weight that we're carrying. I think James mentioned that, and we say this in naturopathy as well, that the skin, the way our external appearance is really a reflection of what's going on the inside. So when we see things like, basic stuff here, acne, eczema, psoriasis, all these like skin conditions, I would say even skin types of cancer, we're starting to see a reflection of what's actually on the inside of the body. So I find that interesting. But I've found, and I'm just going to throw this out, that there is a certain danger associated with losing weight, which sounds really strange, but let me explain what I mean. You mentioned, or we all mentioned, that we have this bioaccumulation, the fat, we burn the fat off. That fat doesn't just disappear. The toxins in the fat don't just disappear. They've got to get out of our body. And the way that works is through something called the hepatic portal system, which is basically porting or moving these toxins through, right? That then get biotransformed, put into the gut, so that with a little chemical messenger that says, hey, we got to get rid of this. This is really a bad thing, right? And then we move it through. But as you mentioned, if we're doing that, we could use artificial weight loss, GLP-1 agonists. I like to call it Nozempic, not Ozempic, right? But Ozempic, Wegovy, all these drugs that are out there that everyone, somehow wants to inject into their body, or however else they want to get into their bodies, it causes weight loss. It'll burn fat. I think everybody knows that the weight loss is there. But, oh my God, if your liver is messed up, see, I edited myself. You gentlemen should be proud of me. I almost used the 4-letter word there. But if our liver is messed up and we're not able to get rid of it, and it can't attach the right chemical signal to it, or if our gut can't move it out more quickly enough, all that we see happening, and this gets wild, is we just see a recycling of those toxins from the body fat into the liver, put into the gut, recycled back into the bloodstream, maybe redeposited body fat, but then we're breaking it down. And it's just like, it's an endless cycle where and that's why I think people that use a lot of those drugs get so sick. Most of the people that use those artificial weight loss drugs can't be on it for more than 2, 3, 4 months because of the massive, massive side effects that they're having from that. And I just really wonder about and now we're hearing about the dangers of these drugs, and people still want to line up for it. People will line up for poisons if they're conditioned the right way to have that stinking thinking that we were talking about, right? But Daniel, I'd love to hear a little bit more. Have you seen, what I'm trying to say is there's a danger in weight loss if we're not taking care of the other pieces of the puzzle. If the liver's not working, if the gut's not working. Jim mentioned the epidermis, which is the skin, using the skin as a detox organ, the kidneys, with the right fluids. There's so much we can do. And if I'm understanding the GetLIGHT method really is like, let's just get your body working that way. Am I hearing that?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you're bringing up a good point. I never actually looked at GetLIGHT strictly from the perspective of, oh, what if people feel like that's a weight loss program, right? And it's interesting because maybe like 1 out of every 4 clients mentions weight, and they say, well, am I gonna lose weight? Because that could be great. Like, is that possible? And what I tell people is like, I don't guarantee weight loss, right? That's not something that I even bring up often, and unless someone brings it up. And so what I say to that is based on the foods that they're going to be eating, because they're going to be taking in foods that are no longer inflammatory. They're going to be often working on their detox pathways. They're going to be working on the gut microbiome, introducing positive gut bacteria. They're going to be working on that mucosal lining. So they're going to be working with the exact systems that are there for the body to naturally arrive at a place where the body doesn't need to carry as much weight. One, because they have more energy, right? When we talk about burning fat, that happens first inside the body. You don't actually even have to, in order for, actually in Ayurveda, for those that don't know, in Ayurveda, they call your digestive fire Agni, right? So there's this thing called Agni that is the fire that breaks down the food that you eat, right? In Ayurveda, they look at that as the first or the second version of us cooking our food. When we eat, right, cooked foods, our body cooks it even further, right, with this digestive fire. This digestive fire is directly related to what the West calls metabolism. So when we lose that digestive fire, which that's connected to the type of enzymes that are secreted that help to break down that food, that's connected sometimes if you're having spicy foods, or if you're lowering the hydrochloric acid that when you do eat meat, meat's broken down in the stomach, but it requires you to have high hydrochloric acid in order to break that food down. It doesn't actually require a healthy gut in order to break down, because it breaks it down further upstream. So this idea of weight loss actually happens in a normal or a natural way if we arrive forward to the natural rhythms of the body. And that's what this podcast is ultimately, I trust doing, is helping people understand that these are the natural rhythms. Injecting things in the body in order to create a response is actually a reactionary thing, which if you're using reaction, right, you're going to get a reaction.
It reminds me,
yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote. I mean, it's around this that I'll steal from the late great Dr. Fred Barge, which was, we've been conditioned to believe that all we need is a pill to sleep, a pill to wake, and a pill for every body ache. Right now, it's injections. But I mean, ultimately, it's again about living inverted and not living in the natural order of things, the natural rhythm of things. I find that's like very interesting. And being from Fairfield, Iowa, which is the epicenter of Ayurvedic medicine in the United States. Yeah, Agni. We don't talk a lot about it outside of that area. So that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and the toxicity is called AMA, right?
Okay.
So they look at,
is that AMA?
AMA.
Yeah.
Yep. So these things have obviously existed for, I mean, anybody that I didn't know anything about Ayurveda, by the way. I didn't know anything about Ayurveda when I did my first cleanse. And actually, the cleanse was so powerful that I did the information that I then needed to then take the next steps for myself came to me. Like, I became a magnet for people, places, and things. And my life shifted so rapidly. Like, in a matter of weeks, I was noticing my reality change. I was noticing people leaving my life experience and coming into my life experience. I mean, I would say I had people that weren't necessarily serving my ultimate evolution. I was noticing that they were getting further away from my experience. And I had like what I would call angels, like just coming into my life with resources, with ideas, with books. And one of the first books that I don't think I have it, sitting in front of me, but one of the first books was a book about Ayurveda. And I opened up this book, and I knew nothing about Ayurveda except kind of like you. I was like, okay, Fairfield is cool. Like there's something happening here and there's something about Ayurveda that they study here, but I hadn't done a deep dive at all. I open up this book and it's describing systems that I had never thought of from this perspective. And this changed my life when I started to see that, whoa, these people have been describing what I'm having a direct experience of in my body for a really long time. And it just gave me so much more context and so much more confidence to keep going down that path. And so I was studying that, not in a way of like going to school, but, the study of life, the school of life was just on top of me at that point. So Ayurveda is a strong lens that I look at the body through. It's really important for us to realize that when we look at our body, whether it's through the chiropractic medicine or functional medicine, or we're looking at it through traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, it simply gives us a window or windows in to look at ourselves outside of a conditioned complex or context that we've been taught. And obviously these things exist. These medicines and these forms of looking at the body have been around for quite some time. And it does require us to either choose to go down that path and like dive head first, or become like what we have become, which is, well, I'm going to study this until the sun goes down, until the sun, I'm going to make this a part of my life, to the point where now it's a lens that I look at life through, which allows us to look at people through that lens. And then when we look at people through those lenses, we actually don't see disease. We don't see wrong. We don't see like imbalance in the way of saying like this is a bad thing. We just simply look at alignment or misalignment. We look at resonance or dissonance. And we are arriving or choosing to arrive at resonance or choosing to arrive at these natural rhythms that have always been there.
Yes. And I just want to wax poetic on that for a second.
Do it.
Just to say this, those healing traditions, whether it be Ayurvedic or traditional Chinese medicine, TCM or these others, they've been around. I mean, we said for a long time, but let's put numbers like millennia, thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
We have been around modern medicine, Western modern medicine for almost 100 years, right? It was the 1930s that they hired Flexner, the Rockefellers and those folks. They hired the Flexner report or the Flexner to look into how can we get doctors to stop doing these natural medicines and cures that have been around forever and just teach our petroleum-based artificial synthetic drugs. What can we do? And they literally, just for people that don't know the Flexner report, take a look at it. Flexner said it's really easy. Just go to all the medical schools. You've got billions and billions of dollars. They had more money than people today. I mean, it was an unfathomable amount of money that these guys had. And they went around to medical schools and basically said, hey, we'll fund your school. We'll give you all the latest equipment and all the science and hire the people and whatever, but you can't teach any natural medicines anymore. You cannot teach it anymore. You can only teach petroleum-based drugs. And literally, Rockefeller said, well, what about the doctors that already know all this stuff? And Flexner's like, they're dinosaurs. They'll die. And he's like, just do it over a few generations and see what happens. And here we are, almost 100 years later. They've had 100 years, a stranglehold on Western medicine for almost 100 years at this point. And honestly, I don't think anyone steps away to say, man, the little 5% of the US population consumes 80% of the drugs manufactured worldwide. Theoretically, if drugs were the solution to health, we'd be the healthiest goddamn planet, or healthiest goddamn country on the planet. And instead, we are the sickest. And our life expectancy is low, and we're all sick and tired and stressed, and we're not sleeping, and we have every symptom that you could imagine thanks to modern medicine. And I just want to reiterate that these other healing traditions that aren't, looking for deficiencies of Wellbutrin or whatever it happens to be, the drug of the day, these other healing traditions are looking at balance and looking at what we would say homeostasis or balance in the body. And I just want to give credence to that because I think people think because it's new, it must be better. Listen, guys, if don't work, people don't do it, and people have been doing Ayurvedic and Asian medicines and jungle medicines for a really, really long time. And they still do it and it still works.
Not only that, it's the reason that many of us are actually here right now.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about 1,000-year-old traditions. Well, where did we even come from?
Yeah.
right? If we're babies of like 100-year-old sort of like way of thinking, then the things before that must have been actually what were carrying life forward.
Yeah.
And if we're seeing like mass die off of individuals or populations, then it really is something to look at. And like part of, my context of being is that whether we look at it as indigenous cultures or original people, or we look at it as ancient cultures, these are our ancestors,
Hmm.
right? Meaning that the things that are older than us, we can actually learn things from. Just like like most people don't think that their grandparents know less than them. They think, well, I mean, grandpa has some like really crazy stories, but man, he's also kind of like wise. Like, wow, my grandfather was wise. Like, it was clear that he had lived a longer life than I had more experiences than I had. And if I was willing to be open enough to glean some of that from him, then I'd probably learn some things that I could apply in my life. So we have to continue to treat ourselves as children of ancient cultures that have literally that are our grandparents and our great
Hmm.
as far as you want to go back. And
Hmm.
just because we say these are our forefathers or these are the founders, it's like, of what? Because, ultimately my ancestors and potentially your ancestors knew enough that it got us here. And likely our lives, we can safely say like our lives probably weren't to a degree of decline or threat that there wasn't enough information or intelligence or life promoting things to get us here in these bodies right now. So I think that we're here for an absolute reason. I think that those of us that are diving into these ways of thinking and ways of looking at life, we've been put on this mission and these things have been put on our hearts for different reasons. And here we are, so if these things are resonating, with people, or they're causing people to think differently, and if it's even challenging people. I was thinking of some of the things I was saying and it's like, oh, this could like really be challenging to a person's way of thinking. And that's perfect, because that is us bumping up against maybe what we do not know and haven't dived deep enough into. And even if a fraction of that could assist a person, that could be enough to
Hmm.
alter their trajectory.
Can I drop it, boys?
Yeah. Please.
Couple things here. I'm just validating. Both of you guys agreed that it's taken us about 100 years to get 50% of the American population sick, fat, and nearly dead. Before that, we had different models. We had different education models. We had different familial upbringing models. We had a different society we lived in. And I think that gets us full circle. Jason opened up talking about the glyphosate being spread on plant matter in the Iowa City area. And I mean, what a travesty. Because as you were talking earlier, Daniel, you were talking about the water that we drink were products of the invisible. And I think that we're all products of the invisible. A couple weeks ago, we were on a show and I said, imagine that glass of water Jason was drinking if it just had like 1% of a poop in there. Would he drink it? Heck no, he wouldn't. But it's full of other types of toxic poop. And it's full of other types of trace chemicals and pharmaceutical traces and heavy metal traces. But that's what we consider like healthy because we can't see the badness in it.
Mm,
And that's what we become is we consider ourselves healthy because we can't see the badness in it.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
And
mm,
I think when you bring this thing back full circle, we all want to be healthy. We want our families to be healthy, but we don't see the badness in things we can't see. We
mm,
just see somebody that's become toxic, but we can't tell them that they're toxic because they'll take offense to that. We can't tell somebody that they have delusion, mental delusion, because they'll take offense to that. But really, they become mentally delusional because of the environment of the things that they can't see. And we have this toxic environment of the invisible. And I think that that's a big part of today's conversation. But I do have two things that I want to make sure that we touch on before we wrap today's episode because I know we're running down to about 13 minutes left on our times with you today. But I want to make sure that I ask this question. We pre-framed this out like this was my job, because it is. I want to pull the best out of you. You've dealt with a lot of people, it sounds like, to this point. Share with us a couple examples of how you've helped people with chronic fatigue and low energy, brain fog, mental clarity issues, digestive problems and gut health, environmental toxicity symptoms. Like, share with me like an example of people that you have actually helped with your getLIGHT method.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I've worked with people that have had chronic digestive issues for years. I've worked with people that have food imbalances or cravings that they don't seem to be able to have control over. I've worked with people that carry, excess weight. I've worked with people of all affluences, people that are like, hey, I'm kind of spending my last money on this kit and I really hope it works. And I've also worked with people that spend thousands of dollars to fly here to do, retreats with me. So all in all, each person has a few things in common. One of those is that there is a desire to do something different than what they've ever done before. There is something within them that recognizes that what is here with you and what is here with getLIGHT is unlike anything that I've heard or seen up until this point. And I'm not saying I'm the only one that, thinks in this way, yet we do become helpers or assistants or even angels on people's paths. So I've been really grateful, really, I don't want to say lucky, but I'm grateful to be in the position where I can transmit some of my direct life experience into something that shows up as a solution for other people. I would say some of my most profound cases are those that just don't even think that they have the time to do these things. So imagine that. Like, I want to do this thing and I know it's going to be really helpful, but like, am I going to have to like cook totally differently? Am I going to have to prepare my own meals? And right. So life has tricked them into believing that they don't have the thing, even if they have all the money in the world, that they don't have this thing called time to do it. And we all know time is actually your greatest resource. So I've worked with some of the busiest professionals, right? The busiest entrepreneurs that are like, I don't even know, I want to invest in this and the money's not really an option, but am I going to be able to take this on? Like, extending this to people that are in that framework, which is probably many people, whether, you have a 9 to 5 or you're an entrepreneur and you've got a 6-figure business, it doesn't matter. But sometimes if there's this limitation that we bring into a situation that is automatically causing us to not feel like we can do it, that's the first thing, right? And then getting beyond that, what the person ends up realizing is that the process that they took themselves through, right? That detox, that cleanse, preparing those foods, they actually realize that they could create time for themselves. And when I say create time, I'm not saying like, oh, I made time for this. I mean that they're adding on years of life onto their life expectancy. They are having experiences where the physical, mental, emotional things, the baggage that they've been carrying around for years fall away and no longer are a part of their life experience. So therefore, they're creating time. They have entered into a dimension, an aspect of themselves, of their lives that they maybe at that point couldn't have even dreamed of. They know that they want to be healthy, and sometimes there are strong symptoms that are at bay. I had a client that one of her strongest symptoms was premenstrual or menstrual irregularity, menstrual pain, which the doctors had diagnosed and gave a big fancy name to, and she thought she was, stuck with this thing forever. And I would say maybe within the first 3 weeks of working on the colon and the liver and, her doing some, working with some reproductive based herbs completely transformed that part of her being, right? And that transformed her life. Like, she didn't even think that was the thing that she was after. She was just wanting to get clarity and not have, get better sleep and, lower the inflammation. But she said, and she was 3 weeks, let's say, into a multi-month process. She said, if she had have known that was the thing that she was going to realize or remedy in this. She would have just done it just for that. The rest was a bonus.
Here, what you're saying here, Daniel, is this is the method to get better faster. And
Yeah.
that's why we do this show.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about these people, they're health frontiersmen, and they're going to somewhere they've never been before. And in marketing, I tell people all the time, what you pay for, you pay attention to. And, sometimes it takes your time, your talent, or your treasure. Whatever you have, sometimes it takes your prayers. So whatever you have the most abundance of, you need to find your path. And it sounds like you have the path to lightness.
Yeah.
It's really powerful that you have this and that you're sharing this.
Thank
I know Jason's probably got like a suitcase full of ideas over there, but I'll let him go and I'll finish up with my final question for you, just because I think it gives people that you landed moment. So Jason, I think you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I'm always ready to go, right? So here's the thing too. I just want to say what I'm going to say now is already going to lead into Daniel Tardy part 2, because we didn't even get a chance to talk about. We mentioned it a couple of times, but there's a whole thing that we've left out here that I think is super important. So I'm just going to read you guys my notes. And there's only 5 notes, so don't get scared. We've been sold that health comes in a pill or an injectable poison and that all problems can be solved in 30 minutes with time for 4 commercial breaks. That thought came to me. Doctors are not trained in anything beyond pills and poisons. And then I remembered cut, poison, burn. That's all that modern medicine is. It's literally, if you break down anything that modern medicine does, you're cutting something out, you're adding a poison in that's not natural, or you're burning it, you're cauterizing it, right? Cut, poison, burn with chemotherapies and radiations and things like that. And then this is where it got interesting. The scariest thing to big pharma and big medicine is that people could remember that they already know how to be healthy. And I think that that's an important lesson from our conversation. But then this is where I wanted to set us up for part 2. And then James, I'm going to hand it right back over to you. Transforming life is also about raising vitality, which we were talking about, right? And increasing our frequencies. And when we raise our frequency, because Daniel, you were talking about angels were coming, people were dropping off, but angels were coming in. Guys, when we raise our frequency, and we will start to attract people who are at that frequency or higher frequencies, right? But then sometimes we outgrow, God bless everybody, but sometimes we outgrow the people that aren't purposely raising their frequencies. And it's just interesting the way that law of attraction works to a certain extent. And the reason I wanted to bring up frequency is because we've mentioned it a couple of times and vitalism a couple of times. But in addition to getLIGHT, and part of getLIGHT, the detox, is that Daniel has a whole other part of this that is frequency medicine and somatic frequency medicine, about raising frequency. And I think it's important that we have another discussion on that. I know we really focused on kind of the biological aspects of, bioaccumulation of toxins and biotransformation and elimination and all those pieces. Very important stuff. Very important stuff. But there's a whole frequency thing here that we just didn't have time to dive into today. So Daniel, I'll let James wrap us up. But we'll get you rebooked right away, and we'll talk more about the frequency and raising frequencies and the body, mind, and soul implications of what that means. Because it's, when we start going down that rabbit hole, it's
massive. It's massive.
It's massive.
Yeah, it's massive.
So,
and this is coming from an engineer. Studied frequency. I studied cell towers. Studied how frequencies hop and spectrums of light, basically spectrums of frequency, and how we communicate. And so I'd be honored to come back and speak about that.
Man, we'd love to have you back on, and we'll get you rebooked. Yeah, thank you, James. I'll turn it right over to you, sir.
And, I close out a lot of times, and I always say, hey, is there anything we didn't ask you that you would like to talk about? And I think we've already answered that. So, but I can't get off today's call. It might take you a little longer than 5 minutes, but I think it's super impressive that you've done a TEDx talk. I can't close out this interview without asking you about that, just because it's been high on my radar. It was at the introduction of the show, and I'm sure people are out there curious, hey, what did this guy talk about? So, what was your TEDx talk about, and how did it change to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you for asking. The TEDx talk was actually came on the heels of people within Cedar Rapids recognizing the shifts and the changes that I was making at a neighborhood level of taking traditional houses and turning them into community hubs. And then as a function of that, we were growing food in the front and the side and the backyards, so that we had a system where when people stayed in these homes, it actually enabled us to grow more food, right? So it was called Stay and Grow. And so I was recognized and invited to do this TED Talk to speak about that. And what the TED Talk ended up being about was us as humans stepping into our superhuman ability. Now imagine this is years before I am the person that I am now. But there was something that I knew and have known for a really long time in my life, that the titles that are given to us and the titles that we give ourselves do not come close to describing who and what we are. And so that TED Talk was my service to humanity to explain, or to express rather, that the title that you have as your job or as your career, that doesn't come close to expressing the intelligence, the potential, the vitality, the fullness that your soul has come to express itself. And I was raising my hand in that TED Talk, essentially saying, I'm a product of that. I'm a product of my environment that technically has impacted many people that look like me. But I had people in my life that were willing to look beyond certain labels or certain ways that they were even conditioned to see me. They looked at me from a higher perspective, or from another perspective that brought me into a higher perspective of myself. And that allowed me to be lifted, right? And this is the Most High, whatever we call it, God, Source, Intelligence, Buddha, whatever we call it, that's that energy expressing itself through others along this path. So I trust that whether a person goes to listen to that TED Talk or they listen to the one that's happening right now on this podcast, that there is something beyond our physical being that is expressing itself through us, through this vessel. And some of you that are sensitive enough may even be able to feel that. You may be able to feel that in your body, in your heart. You may be able to feel that as goosebumps. You may be able to feel it as truth, or it may show up as curiosity, and it may even show up as challenge if it's a direct challenge to some condition that we're holding on to or some belief that we're holding on to. So that podcast is the same thing that's happening here, which is speaking to humanity and saying that you are beyond what you think you are, and you are beyond what anyone else thinks that you are. And we can remain curious, and you can remain curious about who and what you are. And when you do that, you become more, because you are that.
Use the land around you and feed yourself is what I heard.
Yeah. You use the vastness of this reality to see yourself through that lens, because it's vast. I'm right now looking at a mountain peak that no human is going to go up anytime soon. It's vast. There are trees and there are plant life and there are intelligence is there that could be the next plant or the next medicine that goes into a person's body and heals something that they don't even think is curable. It's vast what we're living in. And so we are simply explorers. I consider myself as an explorer. I'm an alchemist. I'm taking something that doesn't look like it could help or assist and turning that into something, but in a way where I'm intentionally communing with nature to listen to what that process is. I don't have to necessarily go to school to turn a thing, a plant or whatever into a pharmaceutical that then, like you guys are saying, really doesn't do the good, that as much good as what they're saying that it's going to do. I can listen to my own innate sense and transform my life because I made the choice to do that. And that is contagious. This way of thinking is contagious. Yeah. That's the real contagion. And that's potentially what you're saying, those forces or those powers, if we look at them like that, which I don't really look at it like that, because nothing external is more powerful than what you are as a soul, So that's actually what they're nervous about, is us finding out that we are infinite, we are souls, and that we've actually come here to undo some of the things that have been done here. And when we rise together and we do that together, there is nothing that can form itself in the material realm that can stand against that, because this is not the only realm that is here serving us. So,
Well, my wrap on that whole thing is we got to cure the invisible.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the invisible is until we take inventory of who we are,
yeah.
why we do what we do, and the internal mechanisms that either tells us it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And we have a blurred line between good and bad. And sometimes good is filled with bad. And sometimes the bad is wouldn't even know what good is. So it's a vibrational frequency of thought and association. Dr. Jason, do you have any closing remarks on today's show before I go ahead and send us home?
Oh boy, I mean, I could rattle on for, like I said, so much time on this, but I think that, thinking about the invisible and just recognizing that there's just kind of in the vastness of it all. We're just little tiny specks on this planet, and this planet's a little tiny speck in the creation of everything, and there's more that we don't know than we do know. And I love the idea of being an explorer. I love the idea of taking ideas and running it through alchemy and transmuting it into things that can really help get people better faster. And I just want to say, Daniel, again, thank you so much for being on our show. It was a lot of fun, and I just can't wait to dive in even deeper. So thank you again.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother.
And yeah, Daniel, it's been absolutely enlightening and transformational for us, your hosts. And I'm sure the listeners got a huge benefit from it too. And my message to the listeners, if you guys are dealing or struggling with chronic health, fatigue, brain fog, digestive diseases, autoimmunity, or feeling like you're carrying the weight of toxicity in your body, Daniel's getLIGHT program could be exactly what you need to finally break free. But as I always say at our closing of these shows, his approach is different because he's combining ancient wisdom with practical detox protocols that address not just your physical toxins, but the mental and the spiritual and the chemical components to who we are and what we have become. And this is a true transformational opportunity for people. And nobody's coming to save you, I say. I mean, I hit the nail on the head every time I say that, but nobody is going to do your push-ups for you. Nobody's going to go to Costa Rica for you. But there are solutions like Daniel's that can prove you can save yourself with the proper detoxification and realignment for yourself. Daniel, thanks for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us today. And to all of you, Get Better Faster Nation, thank you for listening. And thank you for your continued support. Gosh, the best way you can show your support, GBF Nation, is to share this episode. Share it with somebody who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe and never miss another episode. And to get all behind the scenes tomfoolery that Dr. Jason and Rachel and I all do, if you guys could be in those green room chats, it'd be a whole different world for you too. But we've got more coming your way, and we have more incredible guests, and we have them lined up from now until I don't even have enough fingers and toes in my hands to count them. But they're going to blow your mind with real solutions like Daniel's for reclaiming your health, your happiness, and your life. And up until next time, keep questioning everything and keep getting better faster. Daniel, thanks for coming up from Costa Rica today.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you too.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Appreciate everybody out there watching. And remember, comment, like, and share. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Love talk. See you next time.
Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in to the Get Better Faster podcast. Join the movement and visit getbetterfasterpodcast.com to find all our episodes, micro content, and resources to help you and your family get better faster.
I am the